we should examine the following: the unquestioned pillars of biology, including random evolution, survival of the fittest, and the role of DNA, the blueprint for our sustainable, life-affirming future that is literally inside you, encoded in each of the trillions of cells comprising your body. How our beliefs about nature and human nature shape our politics, culture, and individual lives, and how each of us can become what he calls planetary stem cells, supporting the health and growth of our world and every individual in it. So if I'm standing here and we're talking about this stuff and we have organic food choices and options and you get to see it, smell it, taste it, think about it, then it becomes real to you. And then you say, you know what, that's the kind of stuff I'm going to buy at home. And then you know what, your significant others and your family and friends, they start to learn that from you, and it's a ripple effect. But that we have control of it. So in 1982, Dr. Lipton began examining the principles of quantum physics and how they might be integrated into his understanding of the cell's information processing systems. He produced breakthrough studies on the cell membrane, which revealed that this outer layer of the cell was an organic homologue of a computer chip, the cell's equivalent of a brain. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I took chemistry classes and I took biology classes, I took all that stuff. We were always taught, right, that the cell, what, was the brain of the cell? Nucleus. Thank you. Okay? It's not what he said. Now watch this. This is so important that I copied this article, one of the things, and it's going to give it to you to take home. It might be one of the most important things I've ever read, besides the Bible. His research at Stanford University School of Medicine between 1987 and 1992 revealed that the environment operating through the membrane controlled the behavior and physiology of the cell, turning genes on and off. His discovery, which ran counter to the established scientific view that life is controlled by the genes, presaged one of today's most important fields of study, the science of epigenetics. This is cutting-edge stuff. Two major scientific publications derived from these studies define the molecular pathways connecting the mind and the body. And it goes on and on. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and sort of set the table for making you hopefully change the way you think about this stuff. Because I just had a patient leave here the other day, right, Sue, who left and has been here for a long time and heard my little micro talks on the table and seen my messages and read the videos, and despite all this, left after reading that and said something along the lines of, well, I mean, it really, when it comes right down to it, it really is about the genes. And I had another person say, isn't it really inevitable that you're going to get cancer? And I had another patient say, you know why people are getting cancer now? Because they're living longer. So, you know, I get sad when I hear that, because I don't believe that that's the plan for us. I don't buy it. I think our natural state is to be healthy, that disease is wrong, that's not the plan, and that we have to stop lifestyling ourselves into disease and have some confidence in your body's ability to self-heal and self-regulate. Because, you know, ultimately the premise in chiropractic that we shouldn't forget, and the reason why you guys really are here, you might have come in for pain, and pain is just a signal. But the reality is that your body self-heals and self-regulates. Whether you believe that or not, that's just the way it works. No scientist disputes that. Drugs don't heal you. A Band-Aid doesn't heal you. You know, this stuff can't do anything anyway without your brain working. Right? Because what's the difference between a corpse and a living body? We have all the same parts. If you put a multivitamin in a corpse, nothing's happening. You know, so there's this thing about life that we can't really touch and see and explain. That's the vital aspect that chiropractors we work with, trying to reduce interference. And that's really what we want to talk about here, the nature of disease and where it comes from. So Bruce Lipton's work goes on to say that sometimes the body's natural harmony breaks down and we experience disease, which is a reflection of the body's inability to maintain normal control over its function-providing systems. Basically, he says that either the proteins in the DNA are defective, right? Or the signals, what I call the 5 keys, the environmental influences, the physical, mental, chemical, spiritual, emotional. Or the signals are distorted. So chiropractically, we recognize the brain, the spinal cord is the master system and controller of the human body. The body self-heals and self-regulates. Physical interference with spinal subluxation causes that body a lesser ability to self-heal and self-regulate because it interrupts that pathway. Very simple. So deductive logic makes you think, well, that makes tons of sense. And then he says, well, what if there's breakdown in the proteins, in the DNA? What if it's not an interference over here? It's distorted signals, right? Well, he says this, and this is Bruce Lipton, this isn't my philosophy. About 5% of the world's population is born with birth defects, which means they have mutated genes that code for dysfunctional proteins. Structurally deformed or defective proteins can jam the machine, disturb normal pathway functions, and impair the character and quality of lives. However, 95% of the human population arrives on this planet with a perfectly functional set of gene blueprints. So because then the majority of us have a perfectly healthy genome and produce functional proteins, illness in this group can likely be attributed to the nature of the signal, the environment. There are 3 primary situations in which signals contribute to dysfunction and disease. The first is trauma. This is Bruce Lipton talking. Sounds like a chiropractor, but he's not. If you twist or misalign your spine and physically impede the transmission of the nervous system signals, it may result in a distortion of the information being exchanged between the brain and the body's cells, tissues, and organs. The second is toxicity. Toxins and poisons in our system represent inappropriate chemistry that can distort the signal's information on its path between the nervous system and the targeted cells. And then third, the power of positive thinking, and how the most important influence, he says, of signals on the disease process is thought, the action of the mind. Mind-related illnesses do not require that there be anything physically wrong with the body at the outset of the disease. Health is predicated upon the nervous system's ability to accurately perceive environmental information and selectively engage appropriate life-sustaining behaviors. If a mind misinterprets environmental signals and generates an inappropriate response, survival is threatened because the body's behaviors become out of sync with the environment. We may not think that a thought could be enough to undermine an entire system, but in fact, misperceptions can be lethal. Consider the situation of a person with anorexia. This is a neat example. How, friends and relatives clearly see that this is a sickly individual, but that person looks in the mirror and sees that, and their weight, they see, a person who's skin on bones, and this person with anorexia looks in the mirror and sees a person who's overweight. That's just up in here, though, right? So they actually disrupt normal metabolic processes just because of the way they're thinking, the anorexic patient. So the brain, he says, like any governing entity, seeks harmony. Natural harmony is expressed as a measure of congruency between the mind's perceptions and then the life we experience. He says an interesting insight into how the mind creates harmony between its perceptions and the real world is frequently illustrated in stage hypnosis shows. A volunteer from the audience is invited on stage, hypnotized, and asked to pick up a glass of water, which the volunteer is told weighs 1,000 pounds. With that misinformation, the volunteer struggles unsuccessfully with straining muscles, bulging veins, and perspiration. How can that be? Obviously, the glass doesn't weigh 1,000 pounds, even though the mind of the subject firmly believes that it does, and they literally can't pick it up. Right? That's just here. So, to manifest the perceived reality of a 1,000-pound glass of water, something that cannot be lifted, the hypnotized subject's mind fires a signal to the muscles used to lift the glass. At the same time, it fires contradictory signals to the muscles used to set the glass down. This results in an isometric exercise wherein 2 groups of muscles work to oppose each other, which results in no net movement, but a lot of strain and sweat, like doing a plank. So it's, the whole thing about the power of the mind I find fascinating. And what's really interesting, I think, too, is that in China, then there's like 5 tiers of medicine in China. Chinese medicine, the first tier is about meditation. You know what they're, so in their 5 tiers, you know what the bottom one is?
Drugs.
It's funny. It's funny. That would be funny too. But no, it's acupuncture. And so, we're so in our own way in this country, I think, when it comes to healthcare. We even chose to adopt their bottom rung. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to be really holistic now. And we're going to do